in most corporate scenarios, one person's gain is not equivalent to another person's loss. Research has taught us a couple of things. Humans incentivize group-friendly behavior because it helps the individual survive and thrive. And that is game theory. In these games, we look at how we come up with winning strategies in the game of life. So let's start with the first game. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the podcast, The Mammoth in the Room. My name is Nicholas Bocconi, and I'm the CEO of Mammoth Leadership Sciences. I want to continue the third episode with a quick recap of the main points we established during episode 1 and 2. We discussed that if you lead a business, what you're actually doing is leading the people who do the business. Then we said that leading, steering, guiding human behavior in a group is what we call developing and nurturing a corporate culture. And obviously we want a positive one, which we defined as a corporate culture which supports sustainably successful business over time. In order to do that, we all, and specifically the leader, needs to manage and balance 3 paradigms of behaviors in group. 1, that every individual employee of every company needs to first and foremost make sure that she or he and their families survive and thrive and have a good life. 2, that to fulfill this, we need to achieve our goals and objectives, and for that, we need to collaborate with our colleagues. And 3, that while we are collaborating on our objectives with our colleagues, we are also in competition to them. If we want to move up, get promoted, get more responsibility, better pay, etc., etc. And then thirdly, we discussed the biological concept of group selection versus individual selection and established that evolution kicks in on individual level first, and that therefore, in a corporate setting, you will never see employees who put their own self-interests really behind the corporate interests and sacrifice themselves for the company. The reason why I call out really, quote unquote, is because companies around the world are constantly telling their people to do just that. The great business leader understands these scientific facts and that these great teams where everyone understands the group's greater purpose, shares the same team goals, helps and supports each other, shares resources, and where collaboration is king are built around the individuality and the goals of the group members. They work because the leader understands that healthy team dynamics require that the individuals on that team are fostered first. The great leader masters the skills necessary to build a culture where individuals are respected and have the ability to grow, develop and contribute to the group for their own good and for their own good first. Hence, the great leader starts this on individual level and is able to connect the employees' individual goals, aspirations, future development opportunities, and whatever else they want to achieve in life with the company goals. Always remember, you might be the most inspirational business leader on stage, calling out the rallying cry of your company's new strategy, the bigger purpose, why we're all in. But the reason why they follow you is not because you are so great, but because it makes sense for them. Today, we want to talk about how these concepts we established so far play out in the corporate setting. And I want to lead that with a question and some real-life examples. Have you ever asked yourself why certain colleagues behave differently in different situations, depending on who is in the room or is part of the meeting? Or have you seen yourself maybe at times being inclined or maybe even feeling forced to say things or behave in a certain way you wouldn't do in other situations? Here's an example from my own past. I was a very junior manager a long time ago. I would say in the first third of my career. It was a certain situation where I was told that I am not tough enough to my people. And I am normally I'm always very employee focused. So I don't think that there is a truth in being tough to people. I think you always want to be nicer than necessary. A little bit nicer than necessary is also in my book. A little bit kinder than necessary. You might be hard on the fact. Personally, you always should be kind to the people you are entrusted with. In that certain situation, I was told that I'm not tough enough, which obviously was bullshit. But I felt somehow forced to show how tough I am because my management expected it from me. And I still remember this one meeting where a team presented, and I was unnecessarily harsh to that team. And I did not appreciate what they did. I didn't appreciate their work. I was not fair. And I did that because I had somehow I was afraid that this would be, if I'm not tough enough, somehow harm my reputation as a business leader. Again, very junior, didn't stand my ground. And I was pissed because of three things. One, it wasn't me in that meeting. It wasn't natural, right? So the people even looked at me and, why is he acting like such a jerk, right? Obviously, the management who was expecting me to be tough was in the room. So I acted, it wasn't good. It wasn't me. The second thing I was pissed about was I was forced to behave in a certain way because someone else wanted that. So I felt helpless. And then thirdly, and that is the thing I was most pissed about, I wasn't strong enough to refuse and push back because I was afraid to speak up for potential negative consequences of my career. So I felt weak, not strong enough, not at all the leader we wanted to be. So pretty pissed about myself. And from today's perspective, I see it a bit more nuanced and broader. I am still pissed about myself, so no worries. I'm not blaming it on anyone else. I'm still pissed. And I'm still thinking from today's perspective, how could I on earth acted like a jerk like that? But there is also a big responsibility in the hands of the ones who created an environment where a junior manager did not dare to speak up and raise the concerns and acted against his will and basically had to do things which was safeguarding his reputation and make him do and behave in a way which was first and foremost totally unnatural. Then, of course, not supporting the business results because, as you can imagine, when suddenly employees see their manager acting completely different, that destroys trust. So that environment at that time, it's a pretty devastating statement for a corporate culture, how that culture at that time played out. So I'm telling this because we all make mistakes in our career. And I am the first one to put the hands up and said, you know what? Throughout my career, I made a lot of mistakes. I learned from them. And from today's perspective, I wouldn't do that anymore in that way, of course. And I would raise a concern and would also go on the meta level with my management and talk about the fact that we cannot push people into certain things they don't want to do because we think somebody has to safeguard his or her reputation. Now, the reason why I'm dwelling on this a bit is I always ask myself, so is there a way to research how humans behave in groups in a prospective manner, right? It's always easy to look backwards and say, okay, we behaved in a certain way because of hindsight is 2020. But there is a way to research that in a prospective manner. And basically modeling the underlying evolutionary factors that still drive human behavior in today's modern society. And that is game theory. And it addresses the fact that outcomes in groups are not zero-sum. In other words, in most corporate scenarios, one person's gain is not equivalent to another person's loss. Why? Because the constant assessments going on in our brains take into account that everyone else is also making assessments in and about the group benefits and their own self-interest. And this changes outcomes. It's a wonder how we humans get any work done with this blizzard of assessments going on in our heads, but we do, because it helps us survive and thrive. And this neurochemical process is vital to our survival. It works almost like our heartbeat, running in the background, imperceptibly keeping us alive, without interfering with our ability to think about other matters at hand. It's pretty cool and very powerful. And there are technical definitions of game theory, but as a business person, I would describe it as the bridge between self-interest and getting others to serve your self-interest in a group setting. Game theory studies practical scenarios based on mathematical calculations and outcomes and how we come up with winning strategies in the game of life. Though Dr. John Nash did not invent game theory, his research led to great advancements in the field and extended analysis beyond the I win, you lose scenarios, popular in early game theory models. Nash introduced more complex situations in which all of the players could gain or lose, and we also will have an insert on that from a literature perspective. Interestingly, he also is the protagonist played by Russell Crowe in the popular movie A Beautiful Mind. I can really encourage you to watch this. So complex scenarios play out in our corporate setting and corporate offices and boardrooms every day as our human brains continuously assess the ever important balance between self-interest and the interests of the group that we support in order to serve that self-interest. As a leader, you're doing the same thing as your people. You're part of the mix. And you know what? It's beautiful. It's complicated, but beautiful and logical. The problem is not our evolution. It's the fact that as leaders, we've never been really trained to understand, acknowledge, or respect evolutionary or biological truths about human behavior. In fact, all too often, we unknowingly fight against them, which makes our job much more difficult and sets us up for failure. As its essence, game theory mathematically maps out how self-interest plays out in a group setting in a variety of common scenarios, especially around perceptions of fairness, cooperation, and power. And while it is impossible to discuss the related literature in its entirety, it's worthwhile to review some relevant theory models that can help us to become better leaders and be better in interpreting the group dynamics we face. And we're going to do just that. We're going through some what we call games. And in these games, we look at how human beings in this prospective manner react and how they interact with each other. So let's start with the first game. The first game is called the ultimatum game. In the ultimatum game, two players are matched. Player A is given a sum of money and player B is given no money. Player A is asked to make an offer of money to player B. If player B accepts the offer, they both get their agreed upon amounts. If player B rejects the offer, they both walk away with nothing. So basically, player A has everything to lose and player B has everything to gain. One might think that player B would accept any amount of money, but research shows this isn't the case. Research shows that offers below 25% are likely to be rejected, perhaps because the offer is seen as unfair. It appears player B would rather sanction player A for an unfair offer than walk away with less money than he or she feels they deserve. For this reason, player A, who naturally wants to maximize what they keep, must consider player B's idea of fairness in order to have the offer accepted. Rejections in this game can be seen as punishment for the proposer's violation of social norms. If player A offers between 40 and 50% of the money, research shows the offer is almost always accepted. And perhaps that's the reason why the 50 to 40% offer is also the most popular. It's lower risk. What's also interesting is that as the game is repeated, players can build reputations. Player A can become seen as fair, as unfair, or a tough negotiator. Player B might be labeled as someone with a history of rejection, or as a pushover. These reputations can then influence and complicate offers in subsequent games. Now we go to the dictator game. The dictator game is the ultimatum game with a twist. In the dictator game, only player A decides how the money gets distributed. Player B can still accept or reject player A's offer, but if player B rejects the offer, player A does not forfeit the money. Only player B loses out on cash. In other words, player B is completely at the mercy of player A, the dictator. Research shows that in the dictator game, player A offers is significantly lower than it is in the ultimatum game. And that's not surprising. There's much less of a need to make a fair offer, right? Player A can simply maximize the cash take. Why give up anything when you can have everything, right? Well, it turns out to be a bit more complex than that. Research shows that player A ends up offering player B at least some money. Why? Well, player A certainly doesn't want to look like someone who disregards the universal understandings of fairness or oversteps social norms. Think about how you would feel if you intentionally mistreated someone who was unable to defend themselves. You would feel bad, right? This feeling is exactly the sort of evolutionary shortcut that compels us to behave fairly, at least for most of us. And why is that? Well, if you treat someone unfairly, it is likely to come back to haunt you. It can hurt your reputation in the group, which could alter your success in future rounds of the game. And if you treat many people unfairly, you could soon turn the entire group against you. And this is not in your self-interest, because as we have already learned, being alone will not help you to survive and thrive. Not in the dictator game, and for sure not in the game of life. What's even more interesting is that player B often still rejects offers viewed as too low, even when he or she will end up with nothing. It's a sort of, you gotta be kidding me reaction. So far, so bad for player B, right? Well, research also shows that when an offer is rejected, the next offer that player A proposes is higher than in the previous rounds. And why is this important? Well, it shows that even when player B stands to lose everything, they still want to make sure that the dictator understands that they made a mistake. Their message is, you might have won all the money, but I hope you feel badly about it, buddy. And we do feel badly because our stingy offer was rejected. In the next round, we are likely to up our offer to ensure we're closer to acceptable norms, as well as to avoid building a negative reputation which others can and will use against us. So now it's going to get really fun. Now we're going into something which is really playing out every day in a corporate setting. And we beat the games up. It's called the sanction game. And it's another adaptation of the ultimatum game. And in this game, a player C is introduced and tasked with sanctioning player A if his or her offer is deemed too low. To make things more interesting, player C also receives part of the money. If player C were only interested in his or her own financial distribution, there would be no reason to sanction unfair offers. However, not only does research show that player C penalizes player A for unfair behavior, but the penalty rises inversely in proportion to the perceived unfairness. In other words, the lower the offer, the higher the penalty. Another interesting research finding shows that when player B learns to expect player C to penalize low offers by player A, they begin to collaborate. And since players never know when player A's action will impact them or someone they care about, they decide to put an end to player A's unfair activity. If everyone knows something is unfair, they expect those who can do something about the unfairness to indeed do something about it. Let's talk of all these games, how it plays out in the boardroom or in your meeting rooms. Certainly there's plenty of weighing of what's fair and unfair in a professional setting. There's also the continuous assessment by everyone of everyone's reputations. Colleagues, bosses, subordinates, who's a jerk, who always gets the job done, who plays well with others, you get the idea. Add a healthy dash of evolutionary self-interest into this mix and things start to get really interesting. Understanding people's positions and reputations is important, whether you're in leadership position or not. This knowledge heavily influences our decision-making process and behavior in a group setting. For example, if people see you as a tough cookie, they are likely to approach you carefully to ensure they get what they want. Or maybe they don't approach you at all. And while this may have some benefits in some circumstances, it can be a burden in others. Similarly, if you're trying to get a project funded and you know the person who sits on the right of the room is always the roadblock, always a hurdle, you will probably go to this person, maybe first or maybe second, and see what they're willing to give. At that point, you can accept what they offer, negotiate for a bit more, or you can also stubbornly stand your ground and possibly lose everything. Or if a colleague treats you unfairly, you might sanction them by quietly refusing to support their efforts. And if that colleague offends enough people, they will probably struggle to build support for future professional projects and ideas. Conversely, if a subordinate says something insensitive in a meeting that you're running, you might try to help them, read the room better rather than snap at them. This behavior not only helps your subordinate, but it also helps you establish a reputation as a good leader. Whereas if you snapped at the subordinate, you might have been seen as cruel, unfair, or arrogant. But if a peer acts out in a meeting, and I I had my share of this, you will probably challenge them. Because if you don't, folks might see you as weak. And if you challenge someone above your level in the company, you might even be perceived as brave. And that's also sometimes needed. As a leader, these games are being played out around you every minute of every day, and you are part of them. Meanwhile, you're doing your own assessments and learning to the process and manage all the other reputation inputs from your subordinates, colleagues, and bosses. Though you will never play the game perfectly, you must keep learning and continue improving, even as the corporate environment around you continues to change. So let's summarize a little bit of some of the research, what has been done and what we have discussed over the last 3 episodes. Number 1, humans incentivize group-friendly behavior because it helps individuals survive and thrive. 2, humans penalize anti-group behavior because it can put stress on productive group behavior, which in turn jeopardizes individual members' success. 3, humans feel good when they do good. We are wired to support the group in order to support ourselves. We reward team players even if they are driven by self-interest. 4, I would say humans feel bad when their expectations of others are not met. And humans don't like inequality, which can come in 2 ways. Having more than someone else or less. Specifically in the latter one, humans are extremely sensitive to. And then also, just in general, the human brain is constantly assessing risk-reward ratio when it comes to group participation. And it's not a zero-sum game because all the individuals in the group are doing the same thing. And this is how we humans are wired. We are constantly assessing whether the benefits of the group support our self-interest. We continue to serve and nurture the group if we feel that it does. And we leave or pull away if we feel it does not. Who has not experienced a situation where you have the feeling, in this company, I'm going nowhere. And then there is this one headhunter or somebody else offering me this or that job, and you're actually thinking. Because you think, okay, so here it doesn't feel I get my goals supported. But here maybe it does. And then you start weighing risk, reward, and all these kind of things, right? So in order to not have that situation, we always need to make sure that our people are seeing the reason why they are in that very company, in that very department, in your department. As a leader, nothing is more important than understand this evolutionary concept. The good leader allows the members of their team to ask the question, what's in for me? The answer to this question allows the goals of the individual to coexist and to merge it with the goals of the group. Call it 2 + 2 makes 5, 7. The combination creates something greater than its sum. Groups and organizations become better when the individual in these groups and organizations are encouraged to become better. And a good leader knows that people become better when they know why they are in the game. Your people need to know why it's worth it. First for them, then for the company. Not the other way around. All right, this was episode 3. I also want to repeat the fact that there is a book coming out. It's called The Mammoth in the Room. It will be launched in October. I think pre-orders are already out, already possible. And there will be an insert somewhere, or we send it in the notes after the podcast. And I hope you took something away today. I hope you join next time. My name is Nicolas Bocconi. This is The Mammoth in the Room. Thank you.